I need to issue an apology as we start Winging It Wednesday.
Oh.
I'm sorry, I didn't have my coffee quite yet when I saw Stafford and Warren in the lobby this morning, and I was a little bit rude, so I apologize.
You know, they say behind every good joke is a little bit of truth. And
Uh-oh.
so now I feel like I know how you truly feel about Warren and I.
I might Bernie, here's the deal. I might have
What'd
told
you
them
do?
I might have told them I was hoping a microphone didn't work so I didn't have to talk to them this morning.
Oh!
But I was just it's a coffee thing. I'm gonna blame it on
Right.
caffeine, guys. I blame it on caffeine. So Bernie has had a story this morning in her newscast, and it has to do with the Revenue Estimating Conference. And it's odd because we're hearing all this stuff. We're hearing from Darden, and then we hear a little bit about teacher pay raises, and it's all things that when the last special sessions were happening, we were hearing people say, you know what the word's going to be in 2019. It's going to be, despite everything else that's happened and the inability to get some things done, it's going to come down to issues like that once the governor's race starts. So we'll start with you this morning, Warren. We still need to get December finished with. We don't have any state issues, but we have some local issues to deal with. But has the governor's race, in essence, already started?
Well, I think it has. I think it started a while back. But, when you start talking about the revenue forecasting committee and all that stuff, that my question is, when in the hell were they ever right? Go back and tell me that. I mean, every year after year after year after year, they come in there and they tell us, okay, we have a balanced budget, we have a good budget, and everybody knows that it's going to die in the middle of the year, and then they're going to have to go back, and they always claim it's somebody else's fault. My point on the thing, when I hear Jay Darden start speaking, I quit listening, and I used to sort of like him, and but it's just that all of that bunch that just, I think that they cannot possibly tell the truth. And, $7 billion in new taxes, and still, well, that's not enough. We got to have more. We got to have more. All they need to do is just take a look at what's going on in this state. And anybody can tell them where we're wrong. And it's all across the board, but all that stuff, they I don't know. They act like a bunch of kids. They get up there and they argue with each other. They all know each other's lying. And so, then the news media falls all over itself to try to make something out of which one's lying more than the other one, although they don't call it that way. But, it's just one of those things you just expect to live with in Louisiana.
The more and more we go in time, I've told you guys before on this show, the warning I was given the first time I started covering Congress in D.C., that it's really a pool of all the same people. When they go back home to their districts, they're very much whatever they said or whatever they ran on and what they were doing. But once they're up there and you have cocktail parties and you have everything else, everyone just kind of fits into that little puzzle. We used to not see that so much in state government. There was always that to an extent. But it seems like this whole deal with the governor's race and what we're looking ahead to, and at this point, we still don't know who the Republican's going to be.
Things looking that there's tariffs and all that kind of stuff. And the advocate stands blocking that. There's about $40 million. And this, of course, stands in the way of the governor giving all the teacher pay raises that he wants to in anticipation of his reelection. The governor wants his grubby little hands on that money so that he can buy his reelection, as usual. And so the Revenue Estimating Conference seems to be standing in his way. But again, I will reiterate what Warren said. It has very rarely been right in its projections.
Stafford, the estimate, obviously we know what one-time money meant and the problems that it has caused, just the topic of it and looking at these different things. Do you think we have stopgaps in place now to maybe not count that the same way, or have there been changes on the level of the Revenue Estimating Conference?
I have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you from most corporate perspectives, estimating revenue is something that we judge the quality of your vision on in leadership. But the reality is there's so many things outside of your control, right? So, if Saudi continues to pump out a ton of oil, that'll do it to the detriment of Louisiana's economy, and we'll see revenues go down. If we see oil prices go up, there's 1,000 different things that could happen to change the estimate of what's going to happen. Here's what's happening. Everybody is starting to run for office right now, and in my opinion, the teachers of Louisiana do deserve a raise, right? But it's got to make sense for us to be able to do it. We got to be able to afford it. At the same time, I think that there is some politics being played, and I think that that the conservatives in Baton Rouge feel that they have to play those politics to try to damage the governor a little bit because he's got a pretty strong campaign to run right now. I mean, the guy arguably has kind of turned it around a little bit. There's still a bunch of pitfalls that we've got to get through, but we've gotten through some pretty dark days. And the governor's been guilty of it too. There are times where he could have gotten things accomplished positively as opposed to beating people over the head, and he chose to beat people over the head. And I think that if he'd have maybe another 5 or 10 years of experience in politics under his belt, he may have not made those decisions, and I bet you he regrets them now. So, I support what he's doing to try to get this done. I think that in order for us to fix what's going on in Baton Rouge, the system almost needs to implode because we've gotten to the brink of that multiple times. We've got dedicated money out the wazoo. We've got more constitutional amendments than we should have. Right? It should make sense if we're going to be short 3%. Maybe at some point we need to be able to say, "Hey, everybody, tighten up by 3%." Right? But we can't do that right now, and so we keep hitting these programs that if one side says it's okay that they can afford it and the other side says that they can't, and we just create more divide. I hope at some point we try to bring some common sense to the system.
Warren, I just have to ask, how much does the fact that it doesn't seem as if Governor Edwards is going to have another Democrat to contend with, running against him or trying to get in there, how much does that mean as we look ahead to 2019?
Well, it means a lot to him. And, look, this is the way that historically things have been. In Louisiana, you had a one-party state when it was all Democrats, and you had the governor's office was extremely strong. And the governor, the governor candidate went around the state making all these promises. We're going to build this school. We're going to build that road. We're going to pave this road. We're going to build this bridge, blah, blah, blah. And then that's what happened. And the legislature just rubber stamped whatever he wanted. And then things started to change when it became a two-party state. And that was that way, especially across the South. You had these political machines. They just totally ran things almost in a dictatorial way. But then whenever you started having a two-party state, then all at once you started having some disagreement and some arguments in there about which way we're going to go, what we're going to do. And when you do that, the party that's always been in power, the people that's always been in power, they revolt.
I think the real knee-slapper quote in the whole story was the fact that Governor Edwards, Cameron Henry was the proxy for Taylor Barra, Speaker of the House Taylor Barra. And Cameron Henry is he's chairman of Ways and Means, and he's quite the conservative. And so the governor says, "You're just politicizing the process," as though the process is not a political process and hasn't been forever and ever. Amen. And by the way, as a side note, the state's chief economist, Jim Richardson, is retiring. Hello.
Another little
Really?
wrench.
Wow.
All right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well,
Very interesting.
We're going to take a quick break and come back and talk about early voting. We are now in the midst of early voting at this point. The election coming up on December 8th. That means we have this Wingin' It Wednesday.
Yeah.
And we have next Wingin' It Wednesday to go. I always like to survey the folks and hear what they're hearing, what they're thinking, various issues that we have on the ballot.
And if you people want to call in, 232-1542, 232-1542, especially if you have something really interesting to say.
Absolutely. 7:21 now. I don't know, Warren. Maybe I wasn't joking when it comes to you this morning, but it's interesting. Warren just has the best jokes, and I love it. And I hope you just save them. You siphon them off all week long.
Can we hear it?
Just to bring them. No, you can't do that one. Can't do that one.
Stafford, stop.
Not
It's
on
close.
the air.
It's close. It's
No way.
close, but it's just on the other side of not being able to do it. So early voting is underway. I brought my daughter with me downtown yesterday at the behest of the clerk of court, who said she should really just see the process and everything. And I'll tell you, we walked in. It was right as people were getting off work. There was a ton of people downtown, so I thought there'd be maybe a little bit of a line. Walked in, early voted, no problem, walked out. Go do it, guys. It's on the third floor, 1010 Lafayette Street. There are parking meters that are bagged, so because of the parking garage situation, where you can park all along that street and everything. And Lewis himself is walking around. He says he's a part-time meter maid because he's making sure people aren't parking those free spots too long. And I like that. So anyway, I love to survey you guys and hear what you're thinking with your different groups, tribes, whatever you want to call it, all kind of talking about these issues. Carol, we'll start with you and work our way around the table.
Well, first of all, I want to give kudos to Louis Perret. I think he's probably the most highly respected parish-wide elected official because he never asks for money.
It's fair.
He's totally self-sufficient, but also he runs a heck of an office. You do not hear complaints about his office. He really does. And to show, he's been on KPEL over and over again. I think he was absolutely thrilled beyond belief that we got a 50% turnout the last time, and I know he's praying for at least a 35% this time. Is that the latest number that he's looking for?
Well, we had talked about 35. I think now at this point it's like, hey, we had so much. As close as we could get to 50 again
would be great.
We'll see.
Yeah. But what did he say about the early turnout right now? Because I didn't hear that.
Okay, so I think on the first,
yesterday.
did he say? Okay, I think he said the first day or the first couple days up until yesterday, there had already been 500 people downtown.
Yeah,
which was pretty solid.
Pretty solid number. Okay, well, I do hope people will go vote. They have until Saturday, right, to go vote. I personally like to wait until Election Day, and I go in the afternoon to see what's the turnout been, what's the what people are looking at. I think these are some very important votes. And I think it's unfortunate that they were put on this December 8th and not on the November 6th ballot.
The main one.
Yes, with the turnout the way it was, with the people. Now, we still have a runoff in the Secretary of State's office, and that's very important. I'm going to try to get Miss Collins Greenup on because I think she's in town tonight for some kind of town hall.
Yep, we had her on last week, and good. We know her grassroots effort. I love just to see people who you would think would be a long shot to be involved in the political process get involved. I think that's pretty cool. I think Kyle Ardoin's pretty confident, but, we'll see.
Well, the Democrat Party obviously pulled it all out for her. They did not go for Renee Free because they felt like she was a plant, but I don't know why. I mean, she was very highly qualified. But anyway, she did not get the Democratic Party. And of course, on the ballots, the ballots that went out into the black community, Ms. Collins Greenup was on most of the major parish ballots. So,
all right, Stafford, what are you hearing about the various issues, about the process? Are people early voting?
Oh, I think the turnout's going to be I think it might be a little decent. I mean, look, I think you said 500 so far for early voting. I want to say that the last election was almost that many per day.
Well, we did talk to him on Tuesday, so he didn't have Tuesday numbers. So we were just talking about Saturday and Monday.
Okay, so there's potential for some strong numbers there. I could tell you people are pretty motivated. We've got some strong campaigns being ran. The sheriff
mailers going out.
I got a mailer yesterday.
I got two. Yep.
The sheriff's working hard to get his tax passed. The Fix a Charter group is working hard to get out factual information about what's going on with that, and they're running a pretty solid above board campaign. I like to see both groups, which we're fortunate to see right now, are running very positive campaigns, talking about the positive sides of what they'd be doing. There's not a lot of negativity coming out of either of them. I will tell you, there seems to be a rift in law enforcement locally, and I hope that those guys, no matter what happens this election, find a way to come together because they've got to rely on each other.
Actually, and I want to mention this, I posted it yesterday afternoon on kpel965.com, but after our conversation we had last week on this, we got a response from Police Association of Lafayette, number 905. It's published, you can read it, but I'll just read it right here. The sheriff's tax is being put out as a law enforcement tax. At the beginning, Lafayette Police were partners with Mark Garber and set out to be on the ballot together. Garber removed Lafayette Police Department from the ballot and claimed it was because there was no resolution from LCG. Now he introduced the covenant and says the intergovernmental agreement, the IGA, is needed to give Lafayette Police a supplemental pay that was originally agreed to. An IGA is only gained by being introduced to the council and receiving a passing vote that will allow the mayor to enter into one. A resolution is much simpler to obtain, and that could be accomplished should no IGA be agreed upon. So I feel like it almost seems like from their perspective, they want more guarantee that Lafayette Police will still get the portion of it how it was originally rolled out.
Well, so that's a great point, and I think that there's a couple of things going on here. First off, every other municipality, you can't form a preemptive IGA, right? You cannot come and say, we're going to agree that we're going to accept this kind of money until the revenues are generated. What you can do is you can pass a resolution saying that you will enter into an intergovernmental agreement once this passes or fails, right? And that's what every other municipality has done. The only one that hasn't done it is Lafayette. And I personally believe that the reason that Lafayette hasn't done it yet is because Joel Robideau is already trying to run against William Terrio. And so he's not going to do anything that seems like he's pro-tax in any way, shape, or form, even though it goes to some of the people who need it, right? The sheriff's office, when you look at dollar per officer or per asset in the community, runs extremely efficiently. They're much lower paid than the city police. And there's been some arguments made from people saying that, well, Baton Rouge is X amount and this would put them there. Baton Rouge has a couple communities where they have no police force at all, right? And so they have money to go out and work those communities. When you look at the kind of money and the kind of technology that's currently being utilized by our sheriff's department, the price hasn't gone down, right? We've got body cameras, we've got data storage, we've got computers in the vehicles now.
We need to move on kind of for time, but do you think any differently? I know last week we were talking on Wingin' It Wednesday. You said this is, if you support law enforcement, then this is it. Do you still feel the same way, or do you feel a little bit different after
I still feel
police
that way.
association?
I still feel that way, and I've talked to the police association, and I hear. I think what there is there's a lot of mistrust. I think that the police association doesn't trust the sheriff to give the money to the Lafayette Police Department, but every other police department in the community trusts him. I think Mark Garber's done a phenomenal job as sheriff. I think he's got a hard job to do, and I've said it on this radio, I'll say it again, I think that one of the two hardest jobs in the United States are police officer and teacher. And so the reason I'd like to see these guys come back together is because they're very passionate about this. And the sheriff will say it's a small group of loud people, and the LPUA say, or I'm sorry, not the LPUA, but the union will say, we passed a resolution on this. And at the end of the day, I believe that when Mark Garber says we're going to supplement the pay of Lafayette police officers, that he means.
At the end of the day, the only thing that matters is the ballot language. And the ballot language does not include any covenant, any intergovernmental agreement, or anything like that. The sheriff, as he is wont to say, he can do whatever he wants. There is no controlling legal authority on the sheriff except the people of Lafayette, who really should vote this down. This is an ill-conceived tax. It's in perpetuity. Perpetuity. The man has a unified budget of $64 million. If this goes through at about $26 million, you know where he's knocking on about $89 million in a budget in a community. His parish property taxes have nearly doubled in 10 years. Has the population of Lafayette Parish nearly doubled in 10 years? Meanwhile, the unincorporated portion over which he has primary control, his primary duties are not within the municipal boundaries of any municipality in the parish of Lafayette. So there are several troubling things about this. Mark Garber won't always be sheriff, and I say nothing negative about Mark Garber or his staff or his team. Nothing at all. But he has a unified budget right now of $64 million, and his property taxes have nearly doubled over 10 years, and this is in perpetuity. People, that doesn't go away,
Stafford,
ever.
You respond, and then we'll get Warren in on this.
So Carol brings up a couple of things. The wording of the ordinance. The wording of the ordinance is good enough for every municipality.
It's not an ordinance, it's a ballot proposition.
She's not talking about the ordinance. She's talking about what's on the ballot.
Okay.
And I checked with attorneys about. May I finish one thing?
Hold on.
I have checked on the covenant, and I've talked
to Carol,
the.
seriously.
I think you had a little more time than I did.
No, you had a ton. You're going to come back. Hold on. Finish you, and then we're going to come back.
The wording of the ballot is good enough for every other community out there. Okay. And when we talk about the increase in revenues over a decade, we've built a lot of property here, and we've had a lot of value increase because of the things that we've done in this community. So. And there was something else that was put out by Carol here recently, that there was $17 million in the budget that wasn't accounted for, and that they're already over budget.
I didn't say it wasn't accounted for. I said it was a reserve.
Hold on. We're going to let you respond.
I never said it wasn't accounted for.
Okay. Give me about 20 more seconds, Stafford, and then I'm going to let Warren get in on this.
Which just isn't true. Okay. The guys get their money in November, December, and that money is set aside for payroll, and it's money that's going through. And this is the kind of bad information that you get from LCAT and from Carol Ross on a regular basis.
I would beg to differ with you. I have the audit that says this was as of June 30th, 2017, $17.3 million in that neighborhood in reserve.
Warren, I want you to get in on this. What do you think of all this?
First thing I think of, anytime you see an election thing where it says if you vote, this is a vote for law enforcement, I sort of just tune out at that point. It's kind of like saying this is for education, this is for children, this is for old white men, this is for, and rarely is that the case, is what it's actually for. You got to look in drill down in there a little bit to find out what it's really for. All this thing about the pay raises for people and blah, blah, blah. Mark Garber himself said he cannot guarantee that money will go to those police for a pay raise. Said the money has to go to the municipality, and then they have the option of where they want to spend it or whatever.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, to say, well, they're going to get a pay raise. But on the other hand, Lafayette police officers now are paid about, I think, $10,000 or $12,000 a year more than the deputy sheriffs are. So I mean, why are they hollering about the sheriff's department getting a pay raise if they're not going to get it or whatever? I don't know. I don't understand this whole thing. I did hear the president of the Lafayette Police Association, and some of the things that he said, they just took with a grain of salt. And one of the things he said, that the sheriff trying to police a city has never worked anywhere else. It's been tried. I totally disagree with that. And that, I think this is just, I'm like Carol. This thing is in perpetuity. And I go back and say the same thing she said. The sheriff is not going to be there in perpetuity. These things, when you put it on the books, they never come off. And I think the big reason that I heard him say that he wants this money is to pay off the debt that he incurred from the previous administration.
And I think a lot comes up from the Willow Street development out there.
And sell it if it's a problem.
We're going to get a quick break in. We'll be back with more Wingin' It Wednesday coming up on the show at 7:37. All right, thanks, Stafford. By the way, last week before Thanksgiving, you had a house full of people. I was headed to a house full of people. Mm-hmm. And you actually threw out the idea of the app called Reading Eggs and Math Eggs.
Yes.
And when I tell you, we really try to keep the kids off the phones, clearly, for obvious reasons. You hear the recent studies. Just about what it does to attention span and everything else. Thumbs up.
Yeah.
Give that app 5 stars.
Yeah. So my daughter,
It's worth it.
my daughter yells at us that we need to print her certificate after she passes each egg. Yes. And I'm like, look, they do that at school.
Print it.
I'm not doing that at home.
I don't have a printer
Daddy.
here. Well, don't use my paper.
Well, I'll fax you a certificate. How
exactly.
about that?
So we had an issue a few weeks back. It might have even been a month ago with some racial language, some racial slurs at UL put on a building there. Yesterday, we saw the arrest warrant, and honestly, I was pretty disappointed because when I first saw it, where it happened, everything else, I thought it was some stupid college kid, maybe some kind of dare, maybe under the influence of something. Not to say that it's an excuse, but it would have felt better to me than a full-grown, you-know-what adult who now is... I guess so. Just a grown person. Stafford, racial issues continue to bumble up. They bumble up in politics. It's a pretty wedge issue depending on where you are in the country. We happen to live somewhere where it's white hot. We just saw what happened in Mississippi. That senator ended up winning re-election. Do we look towards these things and see, are we advancing? Is it that, yes, overall we are, but you're still going to have issues like this that pop up?
I think that we've advanced pretty incredibly since, the 50 years that we've been kind of going through this, right? Or it's been longer than that. But since we've, as a government, said, hey, we want to do something about this, it's disheartening to see this kind of stuff. But I'd like to point out something to everybody, right? And I think this is important. When we saw what happened in Charlottesville, we saw a group of individuals come together and say some pretty terrible things, do some terrible things. When the media goes and interviews people, right, and they want that soundbite, they don't go look for the most well-versed person on it. They look for somebody who's willing to say the dumbest thing to get on camera. And what I think you saw in Charlottesville was they found all the dumb people in the United States, and they managed to get them to travel to a place together. And when you look at the aftermath, what happened to these guys losing their jobs, these guys getting called out at work, the guy who organized the rally crying on Vice and this, that, and the other. And I think they're realizing that, look, these places that when you go on the internet to foster these feelings that you have, and you go to these dark corners of the web, and you come out and say this stuff publicly, you're going to get rebuked. And I believe that in Lafayette, as much as there are times where I feel I see some racial problems and that type of stuff, I believe that our community as a whole is full of good people, and that we in the words of President Bush, right? I'll keep harping on this. I've said on the show before. Too often we judged our foes by their worst and ourselves by our best. And so I don't think we should let this one instance of one person being a dip, whatever, judge how we do things in our community or judge how we hold other people accountable. So, and the last point I'll make, we just saw these high school students get together and do a Nazi salute for their senior photo, right? And I saw the media get frustrated because there was no disciplinary action taken by the board. And their response was, this is a First Amendment issue. What they did was bad and it hurt people. But it's not our job to go out there and beat up people for their rights.
It was off school campus and stuff, right? So they couldn't really.
And I couldn't agree with that more. Look, those kids are going to have trouble getting jobs for the rest of their life because they did that dumb stuff.
Yep.
And it's unfortunate that one decision cost them that. But go out to the black community and look at all the kids who got busted with a joint and look at how it's affected their life. And so the more of the story is you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes, and I don't think that we should judge or hold whole groups in the community accountable for the actions of idiots.
Warren, your thoughts?
I pretty well agree with most all of that. That how far have we come racially? We have come light years, and that really and truly, I think that there is so little real racism in this country compared to the rest of the world, and it's not even funny. And that when you look at it, most of the racism comes from media. It comes from the political parties who try to use those as divisive issues to pit one group against another. And that I just think we're making lots of headway. We've already made eons of headway. But you look at one of the things Stafford said about the education or whatever, that or the government trying to balance the playing field, that I think it's right the opposite. The government is not trying to balance the playing field. They're trying to continue on this racism, this racial divide. It's why that they keep focusing on keeping the minority communities and the poor people in the failing schools to keep them ignorant, to keep them dumb, whatever you want to call it. I mean, it is a crying shame, and that and then they use them. The other side wants to use those that say, "This is what you're going to become if you don't vote for us," and blah blah blah. That's the real point. When it gets down to the individuals, the people, I think that we are head and shoulders above the politicians, the media, and whatever else.
So it sounds like, Carol, what Warren's saying, not to paraphrase you, because everything you said was great, but it doesn't take the government action so much, but the people who are just deciding to move on, are just deciding to do things a better way, or think.
Well, originally it did take government action, and that has been, I think, very effective in eliminating the racism built into some of the structures in our country, the organizations, the governmental entities, etc. And I think that's really gone a long way. Sometimes it goes too far, I think, and it often, not often, but every once in a while, you'll see that resentment come out, from some folks who feel that it's gone too far. As a country, I think in general, as a society, we have become a very inclusive and very tolerant society. You will have individuals who are just boneheaded people who don't get it, who don't really, who can't accept changing things in a lot of ways. And so I think that's what you have but on the other side, the thing that bothers me is that every time there's something like Cindy Hyde-Smith made a stupid comment, I don't think she meant it racially, but it was ginned up by the opposition party to make it into a racial thing, which I think in a way could have worked against them in a state like Mississippi, that they feel like that everybody's always calling them racists, and they feel a little resentful of that because Mississippi too has come a long way, just like everybody else. So to take one comment that she made out of context and to really try to do the racism divide was very unfortunate, and it didn't work. And in fact, the Democrats should have looked at their own candidate. He's had ethical problems since he served in the Clinton administration. Yeah. So, I think that the unfortunate thing about what happened at UL is I really thought that would never happen on the UL campus, especially from someone who is not a student. Is not a student.
Faculty member?
Yep.
No. Oh,
was-
no.
He was on.
Who the heck? How did he
what's the
get?
right-
How did he get to the banner? By the way,
We have about 30 seconds in this break.
What's the right context to use the phrase? I would attend a public lynching if they invited me.
Well, she said,
Up,
I think
hold
she said,
on, hold
she said
on.
public hanging.
That's
Oh,
right.
sorry,
Yeah.
public hanging.
Public hanging, things that, there are so many things. I could probably name a list of things that you know what that means to me whenever you say that as just stupid. You know what that means to me whenever you say that? It has nothing to do with actual public hanging. It means I trust him. You
That's
could
fair.
You could line it up with so many different things.
fair, but
what we say about my mother-in-law? If she tells you it's Easter, dye your eggs. Because you could she's a trustworthy person.
I wish she would have said that.
Warren, wrap this one up. Yeah,
The
I'm sure
first thing-
she
the-
does too.
Right.
Yeah, the real point is there is a huge difference between a public hanging and a lynching. A lynching, a lynching was always an illegal act, primarily perpetrated against people who couldn't defend themselves or whatever, minorities or poor people, what have you. Public hangings were legal executions. And as Lewis, hell, I can't even think of his last name now, used to say all the time about these things, what do we need to do? He'd say, have a hanging in downtown Lafayette.
Wow.
I'm not touching that one.
2018, maybe there's a little bit more loaded, I guess. 7:53 now at Newstalk 96.5 KPEL. We're back with more after this. 7:56 now at Newstalk 96.5 KPEL. We're back to wrap things up here on Wingin' It Wednesday. Because I got a number of texts and a number of emails, I think it's appropriate time with just about a minute left to say I am proudly the referee of this group. And Bernie, too. She's sitting over there pressing all the buttons. Everyone serves a role here. There's a reason we have Stafford. There's a reason we have Carol. Warren shows up for the coffee. We let him come in,
I think he sleeps in the parking lot.
He just has a history knowledge. Stafford can speak on issues of business currently in the industry she's in. Carol's been around for it all. And
It
can
is
talk
an
about,
opinion show.
It's opinions.
Everybody gets their opinion.
None is favored.
No.
Over the others.
No.
Stafford can say what he wants. He could chew me out, and I can take it because I have thick
Rob,
skin.
I would never chew you
Well,
out.
please, on the air at least. But anyway, thanks to you guys for being a part of this because this is great, especially when we're around an election. There are always going to be contentious issues, and I would hope if you guys have the passion and other people, listeners who share the passion, which I know they do because I get the emails, trust me, then they're going to the polls to vote. Because
so Rob, we don't want you to take it personally because we don't.
I'm not taking it personally.
And, listen, and if you care, canvas. That's the one thing I think is really important to tell people. If you are as motivated about a subject as I am or others, and you care, walk your neighborhood and tell people why.
All right, Wingin' It Wednesday, brought to you each and every week by LABI, Louisiana Association of Business and Industries. They're back again next week. The Ross Report this afternoon at 2.